This is our second video in this series on creating a Flutter application. I don't know if you guys had a chance to follow, anybody who just joined, to follow the sign-in link, but it's posted here in the chat menu. So it's the bit.ly link. Go ahead and follow that if you haven't yet logged in. And once you're up and ready, you can follow along. The outcomes for this training are first and foremost to get some idea of the basics of Flutter. We did a little bit of that the last time we met. We're going to learn more about Flutter today. We also want to cover the Dart language a little more in depth and see what else we can do with it to create something that's a little broader than our hello world. The other thing is this will kind of be dependent on what IDE you're using, but we all want to kind of be on the same page with how to use an IDE of our choice to create independently, and then when we collaborate, how to use the things that are on like each of our independent systems to create something that's going to be shared with other people in the group. So when we go to make our project app at the end of the year for the competition, we're going to want to make sure that even if one of us is using Android Studio, the other one's using IntelliJ, that we can still bring the functionality together. And I only mention that because I'm going to be using a different IDE for this training, but it has the same look and feel as the Android Studio, so it shouldn't be too different. We're going to only briefly review the Hello World just to see where we started and pick up from there. Our app is going to be a little more expanded than that one. And by the end of this, we're going to take what we start with in terms of this small app, and we're going to expand it a little more. At the end, we can have a little bit of time for thoughts and reflections, maybe debugging if you got lost somewhere on the way. So if you have big questions or big thoughts, don't feel pressured not to ask during the training, but we will have some time at the end as well. Actually, before I move on, do you guys have any questions, concerns, or anything else?
Hey,
right.
Ricky.
Yeah, what's
am I
up?
audible?
Hello?
Hello.
Hey,
Yeah, I was just asking, like, the chat function is not open for everyone, I guess.
you're saying you can't get into the chat?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I can't either.
huh.
Oh, I think we sort of created a group on Teams. If you look up, give me 1 second, DSC USF 2020 to 21, and join that group, I think you'll have access to the chat. Let me know if you're having trouble joining it.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear
Join.
that. No, go ahead.
Okay. So shall I have to reconnect to the meeting, or like it will automatically assign me to the chat?
I don't think you'll need to. Hold on, let me just manually add you guys, and let's see if you have access to it.
Okay. Thanks.
And do we want to wait for everybody to join before we move on with the training?
Let's just make sure they have access to the chat. And
Okay.
I added you guys to it. Are you able to access the chat now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, Ricky, go ahead.
Okay. And again, if you guys do run into trouble like that, feel free to ask throughout the training because we want to make sure you guys are on the same page. So thank you guys for raising that concern. All right, to review a little bit about what Flutter is and what we do with it, it's a UI toolkit developed by Google. The main purpose of Flutter is to create material design apps. If you're not familiar with the term, material is kind of like Google's approach to designing their applications. So if you look at enough material applications, you'll kind of notice the pattern and what it is that makes something material. And we're going to see what that looks like when we develop our app today. The other nice thing is that you can make a pretty big range of different applications from just a single code base. So you have, the Flutter SDK, and you can make any number of things happen with that one toolkit. So what we're going to do today is kind of like the tip of the iceberg compared to what other people might do professionally. I actually have a good friend who's starting a business, and their app is based on Flutter. And what he does is he has the app like tied to a database, and it uses like location functions. Users can upload their own information. So it's pretty broad, and we're, again, just going to get a slice of it. But I'm hoping that the slice that we see will be enough to get the ideas going for everybody. The other nice thing is that it gives you a pretty consistent design concept or design framework. So you don't have to worry about overthinking like, oh, should we put this over here? Is this layout going to be different from what our users might expect? The really nice thing about Material is that a lot of apps are already developed using it. So to go with that, we're just, giving the user something that's familiar in terms of the look and feel. The other really nice thing is that you can make these apps really quickly. They look professional and they're fully functional. Dart is the programming language that goes hand in hand with Flutter. It's client optimized, so that way it can run without too much hassle in the client's phone or laptop or whatever they're using. It's object-oriented, like our favorite programs, Java, C++, Python, or programming languages, rather. So you'll see a lot of familiar terms, like we're going to extend some classes. Well, anybody who's used to Java is used to doing that already. Again, the syntax and other usages are also very similar. It's designed with portability and device compatibility as its top priority, and that's why a lot of people use it, including my friend, because they can run it reliably on other devices. They don't have to worry about if iOS compatibility is like, this big thing, like it might be if you were using a different framework. With Dart, you're writing one code and it's working on all the other devices. So Android, iOS, and the other nice thing is it can integrate with the web, so you don't have to limit yourself just to a smartphone or a smart tablet. You can have it run in the browser if you want to. And that's really good to open up your audience to an even bigger range of people. And as we're going to see, there's lots of existing libraries that we can pull from already. So we're not reinventing the wheel or starting from scratch on too much. Widgets are the other big thing that we're going to see today. They're interactive components, and from these we'll construct our apps. These are the primary resource when we design Flutter or Dart apps. We're going to see that a lot of widgets already exist, and all we have to do is change them a little bit to make them do something different. Extending their capabilities is going to be the big thing that I want you to take away from this in terms of quickly making an app. And again, all of this is to save time. We don't want to reinvent the wheel for everything in our app. We just want to get the basic system in place, and then we want to make it do what we need it to do. Some examples that we're going to see today is it can do a list view. There's widgets for a menu bar, a slide out menu, and interactive icons. So as we're going through this, you might want to ask yourself questions like, what else can we design an app to do based on what we see? How else can we use the Flutter language and the SDK to build an app for our project at the end of the year? Other components that we could integrate to expand that app, like databases, machine learning concepts, or APIs. And also kind of what our look and feel will be like so that our users can get their best experience from it. And this will pretty much take us to the end of this training. So here in a second, I'm going to close this and open up my IDE. Before I do that, does anyone have any questions? All right, if you just joined us, make sure that you go to the comment section and follow the link to check in. And I'm going to close this window and we're going to go ahead and start this process. All right, now this was the one that I did on my own when I was testing out the guide that I'm going to show you. But I just wanted you to see a little bit about what a full Dart program is going to look like when we're all of this is said and done. So if you notice, we, like any object language, we use classes. Like I mentioned, we're extending things. We're going to see that widgets are kind of key to putting this application together. Kind of like with Java, we have return syntax, we have like brackets, indents, all that good stuff. If you're using something like the Android Studio or some other SDK, again, your IDE might look different. So I just want you to know I'm using IntelliJ because we get it for free, and I'm already using it for a few other projects. If you don't use IntelliJ, that's totally fine. But if you're opening up your system and you're like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't look like what this guy's using, it's just because I'm using something else. But what I also like about IntelliJ is you can integrate the entire Flutter SDK into it pretty easily. If you want information on how to do that, you can reach out to me after this training. That's not really going to be covered, but I did want you to know that that's something you can do. So Android Studio actually uses the IntelliJ UI in one of its themes. So if you're using Android Studio, it might actually look very similar. All right, so this is kind of going to be what our app looks like, but I'm actually going to make a new project for this, or rather not make a new project, I'm going to nuke that project. The other thing that I want you to note is that if you're using something like Android Studio or IntelliJ, you'll have to have your emulator set up. That's something that we're not going to cover in this tutorial, but this is what it'll look like if you're using one of these IDEs. You would select your device up here that's pre-configured. Just go ahead and click it. And it opens up this emulator right here. So again, this is kind of going to be what we're doing by the end of it. And I don't know why that changed my volume settings, but that was weird. Okay, so this is our starting point. If you want to, you can go to New Project. If you have this set up already, and you can click Flutter. And then you would click Next and finish that up. But again, I'm just going to use this template because it's easier for me. Can it run smoothly on Visual Studio 2? I got to be honest, I've never ran it on Visual Studio. Has anybody in this chat done that before?
I haven't, but I think it should run smoothly on it.
Okay, so somebody else has, and they said, yes, it can. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. So we got 3 IDEs we can use. That's great. I don't use Visual Studio because I'm running Linux on this system, and I've not had a good experience with Visual Studio on this one. But yeah, if you're using Windows and that's easier for you, go ahead and give it a shot. Okay, so I'm going to be walking you through a pretty basic setup. The other thing I wanted to do with you is share the link that I'm using as my guide. So in the chat box, you should now see the link. If you want to follow with me, that's great. If you don't, I'm going to be going through it anyways, so you don't necessarily have to. Okay, so the other thing that we assume is that you followed the Hello World guide that we did a few weeks ago. And part of this guide that I'm going to do with you starts us with a hello world. So I'm going to just launch this to make sure that everything's working the way it should be. So I open my emulator. I click this button to start to run it. And it throws an error. Don't do that. Sorry, what the expected behavior is it should be launching our program. Now, depending on your setup, this could take a long time or a short amount of time for your program to assemble and actually launch in the emulator. Mine is taking longer than it should. All right, well, that runs. I just want to go through a couple things that we're going to need to know for later parts in the tutorial. Like you can see, the first thing in this hello world is a widget. We add different things like we would in a markup language or like we would in you know, a Java front-end development kit. So the theory is that when this app finally does run, it's going to say hello world in the middle, and the toolbar is going to say welcome to Flutter. And as you can see right here, that worked. So we're in good shape with that. Now I'm going to leave this running in the background. I'm also going to adjust my speakers for me. Okay, now next what we're going to do is we're going to, since we know our IDE works, we're going to start to expand on this functionality. So a couple things to note as well. We have a main method here, and then we have down here the big class that we're using in the main. So this is kind of like a shorthand to say we're just going to run this. Other apps might do that differently. All right, the first thing we want to do is we want to use an external package. That's going to be part of the app that we're doing. The package actually just picks up random words, and it's going to help us to come up with a different set of possible like design startup names. All right, and again, this is just a demo, but it's going to be the same way to import apps no matter what you're making. So in the guide in step 1, or rather step 2, part 1, we want to go to where it says dependencies, Flutter. We see that down here. And I already added the English words. All right, but if you were starting from scratch, then you would just need to go, you would only see this, and the only thing you'd have to add is the package name right here. Okay, and that's going to tell Flutter when we start looking for this package, you know, you need to get it or you need to use it if it's already downloaded. Okay, I'm going to go back to main. The next thing we need to do is actually run the import command so that we can use that package. So we're going to put it right down here because I try to keep my import statements together. And we can save it so we don't lose our progress. Are there any questions or concerns or anything like that so far? Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to add a new widget, or rather modify this widget, and then later we're going to add more to that. But just to show you what that's going to be like, we're going to add something from this package. It's called word pair as our first kind of proof of concept for what we can do with this package. All right, now I like to comment my code. I don't know if you do, but I'm going to note that this is going to help us generate pairs of random words. And you're going to see what we'll do with that when this is done. The next thing we want to do is use this word pair to make, as you guessed it, random words. So we're going to modify this to add text that's just random words with Pascal case. And Pascal case is just when you have things like capital for the first letter, lowercase for everything else, no white space. And since I am adding this new word pair to test, I'm going to remove this hello world because I don't need that anymore. So I save my work and I'm going to run it just to make sure that this is all working the way it should. So down here we see our word. So again, these are totally random combinations. They're from the package. We made this word pair object right here, and then we use that with the Pascal case parameter to generate this random word as text. Okay, so the only thing that's changed with our application is literally the text that we're putting on the screen. All right, now that's a pretty simple change, but by the end of it, we're going to have that basic concept with a lot more than just one word. All right, before I move on, are there any questions or concerns, etc.? Okay. The next thing we're going to do is add what's called a stateful widget. Now, Flutter has two types of widgets, so I wanted to go over both of them with you. A stateless widget is immutable, and that means that their properties can never change. Any value with a stateless widget is final. But a stateful widget maintains a state that could change at any point during the lifetime of that widget itself. So when you do a stateful widget in Flutter, you need to have at least two classes. One of them is a stateful widget class, and that creates the instance. The other one is the state class. The stateful widget class itself is immutable. We can throw that away and regenerate it, but the state class is the one that's going to persist over the lifetime of the widget. So we need both of those to make a stateful widget. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to add a stateful widget called random words. What that's going to do is create a state class, a random word state, and then we're going to use and expand each of these to modify our MyApp class down here to do even more than what we just did. Okay, so we're going to start by making the boilerplate, which is kind of just a fancy way of saying like the basic framework or the foundation for this widget. So it's called random words. And we'll, give me 1 second, I'm sorry. Okay, so we're going to use a shortcut called stful, and watch what this shortcut does. So just entering that and then pressing enter is going to make our stateful widget and our state widget. Again, we need both of these to make this new thing work. So I wanted you to see that one shortcut can develop both of them at the same time. Okay, the name of the widget is going to be random words, and we're going to go ahead and label each of these. So later on, we're going to call random words, and it's going to work kind of like this down here. But the nice thing is using it as a widget, it's going to let us do even more. Okay. Notice also that when I enter the name for this, it adjusts the name down here as well, and over here. So the cool thing about Flutter is that it's aware that it needs these two things to do the same task. So it lets you just modify the name for this one, and it takes care of the rest of that for you. So we can keep going. Okay, the last thing we're going to do for this step is we're going to update our build our build class, or I'm sorry, our random word state class, and we're going to add some parameters to let it actually make the word pair. Now, if you notice, this is the same thing that we did down here, but we're moving this functionality up to this widget because it's going to let us do more modular things. All right, so we can remove this down here because we already made that. I'm going to delete that comment too. We're going to delete this word pair text instance, and then we're going to call our random words that we developed here. All right, so we build it up here, we call it down here, and we're going to run. Good. Sorry, I thought I'd do that for you. Okay. Okay, so my IDE is complaining. I'm going to guess it messed up something. Oh, sorry. I've been working on Java this week, and we end with semicolons at the end of a line, but we need to use a comma because it's Flutter. Okay, so let's try this now. Okay, so it's building. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. So what it should do is it should generate our new word pair down here, but I need to check my code real quick because I may have put that in the wrong place. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. We missed a step. I am so sorry. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is we want to return this text. We're going to return the word pair. And like we did earlier, we want to return it as Pascal case. And that with a semicolon. And now we're going to try to run our app. Okay, cool. So sorry about that. Yeah, so some notes to observe. The last time that we ran this, it had a different word. We have a new word, and that tells us that our code is working the way we want it to. So again, this is a nonsense word, but if you're just a random startup and you need a name for something, then you could run this and be like, oh, okay, that's a name that we could use. You could also use that for any number of things too. You know, the point was just to show like these widgets can do that kind of functionality. Okay, so that takes us to step 4 in our training. Does anyone have any questions so far? I know that that was a lot, and I had an error along the way, so I don't mean to confuse anyone. Any questions or concerns or comments? Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make an infinite scrolling list. What that'll do is it'll let us, as it says, literally scroll infinitely, and for every page that it generates, it's going to send out more word pairs. So that's why it's going to be really useful that we made this widget a little more modular, because now we're going to build on that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our random word state, and we're going to add a couple more things to this. Okay, so the suggestions up here lets us display suggested word pairings. Down here, the bigger font is going to change the way that our text appears on the screen. So if you have like a high resolution monitor, it might be a good idea to adjust for, larger fonts. But we're going to use this fixed 18-point font for right now. And then later, if we need to change it, we can do that. Okay. Can you guys give me a second? I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay. All right, we're going to add a new widget. So this widget's going to let us build suggestions, and we're going to just make it down here. Okay, so a few things to note with what we just added to our code. The item builder callback is going to be used once for every suggested word pairing. What it does is it makes each suggestion into a row for our list tile. For the even rows, it's going to add the list tile row. For odd rows, it's going to add a divider. And that'll visually separate each entry. If you have a smaller device, the divider might be a little difficult to see. We're not going to cover how to adjust that. But I did want you to know that if you do encounter something like that, that's where you would start debugging. The next thing it's going to do is it's going to add a 1 pixel high divider. So we wanted to give it that length. Again, it's going to divide I by 2. If we've reached the end of the available word pairings, it's going to generate 10 more and then add them to our list. And that's what this suggestions add all generate word pairs take 10 row does. So as we scroll, it's going to generate more words and more words and more words. All right, the last thing we want to do is we want to take this widget and we want to add it to the random word state. And that'll look something like this. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use the build suggestions instead of directly calling the generating library. So I'm going to take what I just did and have it do something different. Okay. The very last thing we're going to do before we launch is we're going to make a bunch of changes to our very first widget down here. All right, so the first thing we are going to do is, because we already made the title up here, and we don't need that anymore, down here, we're just going to remove that. Same thing with the home. And all of this going all the way down. Okay, so basically, just to refresh what we did, we took our name generating class, we made it into a thing that's going to make lists out of it. We used that list builder up here in this widget that we made a few minutes ago. And then finally, we modified the original widget to use all of that up there. So in theory, when we launch this, it's going to make us a list of random words, and it's not. Okay. Okay.
I think you have an extra opening point or closing point.
What line do you see that on? I'm sorry.
Yeah, on line 65.
65? Okay.
And then there should be, on 64, there should be a semicolon instead of a comma.
Thank you.
64, my bad.
60, yeah, okay. Okay, neat. All right, so I'm guessing that my burnout from this point in the year is getting the better of me. I apologize to each and every one of you. I'm going to go back through my work one more time and check what I got. So, okay, going back to the random word state, we want to make sure we have our suggestions and the bigger font. We want to make sure that the build suggestions is, of course, I apologize. I put the build suggestions in the wrong place. is part of our random word state, because we're expanding our random word state. Okay. Then as we did down here, the build row is part of random word state. Our return is updated to do the right thing, which is give more information about this new list.
Make sure you have text style as well on line 18.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
On line
right.
18 is, yeah.
Good catch. Okay. Okay. Font size, case matters. Case matters. Okay, cool. Let's try. Okay, perfect. So as usual, when people are watching, we do make mistakes. So cool. So again, some more notes. That should be pretty clear what the differences are between what we started with and what we see here. We started with one random text in the middle of the screen. Now we have a whole list of random texts. And as we scroll, the lists keep coming. So the cool thing about this library that we're using is that it does just pull in these random words. Again, none of this means anything, but if we're a startup company or we need some random name, this might be useful for us, right? The name of the app shows up here, so we don't just have this, random list of words with no context, but we can see like, oh, it's a startup name generator, right? The one thing that we want to be aware of if we had this in production is making sure that our dictionary has terms that are, like appropriate for the task and not maybe too random, but you kind of get the idea. I could not look at these and tell you what my startup would be based on something like Crybeard or Dumbneck, but that's not really the point. The point was to show that we used a bunch of these widgets to make an entirely different view that extended this main widget down here. And we can do this all in Flutter. All right, so when we do something for this club, we might not necessarily do random words, but we could have a list of locations in the area that could do, give our users some kind of like idea of like, okay, what in my area is like a, like if we did like something for the USF campus map, then maybe we could have a list of the different buildings. If we created something that used an API for like with Google Maps, then we could parse that data right into a list, right? So this is really simple and kind of goofy, but the implications of making this list so easily and quickly, that's really the takeaway that I wanted everyone to see. All right, we have a couple more things that we're going to do before we finish up. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, also, whoever was helping me out with the code, thank you. I appreciate that. I do feel like it's the point when I'm in the semester when I'm losing my mind a little bit. And it does help to have a second set of eyes on my work. So, all right, the next couple things we're going to do is add a little more interactivity. We're going to add some icons to this list. We're going to have a feature to navigate to a different screen where we can save favorites. And we're going to look at maybe tweaking the UI theme a little bit. So with this app in mind, we're going to change this list view to include a little heart. And that heart is going to be like a favorite. So let's say that I am making a print company, right? And I really like trunk print. Well, I can heart that one. Maybe that's the only one I like. So at the end of the list, or I'm done scrolling the list, I can go back to my favorite screen and I can say, okay, I liked 4 of these out of like 100. Now which of these 4 am I going to settle with? That's going to be the goal for this phase of the app. So we're going to add a new aspect to our list view. And I'm just copying it from my guide. This is going to let us save different word pairings for later use. We're going to edit the build row. To add this right here, this is going to check that a word pairing hasn't already been added to our favorites. Again, this is all done randomly, so there's the possibility that the same word pairing shows up a couple times. It might not be likely, but it's still possible. And we just want to make sure that we don't do that. And if it does generate more than one, we don't want to save more than one. All right, we also want to add the icon itself. And we're going to do that with a widget. All right, a couple things to note. You can see on my IDE that it's showing us what these two icons will look like. So this is the empty heart. That means we don't care about it. But the full heart will be the ones that our user liked. We're also defining this color red so that if they like one, it'll turn to that color, and it shows us a preview of what that looks like right over here on the side. And that's one thing I also like about IntelliJ. It gives you this kind of information right here on the side. So as you're developing your app, you can get a better visual on what each component looks like. I'm going to run this so far just to make sure that everything's the way it needs to be. Aha. And we have our heart icons. Now notice right now when we click it, it's not doing anything. We need to add that interactivity so that clicking it changes it to this shade of red. Otherwise, it's just going to look like this empty heart. So back in our build row, we're going to add yet another component to extend. And this is going to be the on tap. All right, so what OnTap does is it gives interactivity to change the color if something is liked or saved. So if it's already saved and a user clicks that heart icon, then it's actually going to remove the favorite. But if it's empty, like we saw over here, and they click it, it's going to make it red, so the user saved it. So let's try to run this and see what happens. All right. So clicking it now does something. You can even hear a little bit the sound effect that Android makes when you click it. So we know that this phase is good and well. I'm going to like a few so that when we test later on, we can see these in our different view. Okay, questions or comments or concerns? Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to navigate this to a new screen where we're going to have all of these saved things, only the saved ones appear. All right, so this new page is also called a route in Flutter. And we need to add functionality to actually navigate from the home route, which is this default view, to the new route, which is going to be the list of favorites. So what we're also going to do in this phase is add a menu button up here. It's also called like a list icon. And what it's going to do is when we click it, it's going to pull out that view. It'll be really convenient because it's right here on the home page, and we can toggle between the different routes. So we're going to go back to our build up here, and we're going to change the behavior to do a few more things. Right at actions. Yep. All right, so the action just says that for the icon button, if we press the icon, it's going to add it to our saved list. We also want to add a push saved method. Okay, I'm just going to copy this whole code for you. Sorry, this part of the guide doesn't make it super clear where it's okay, neat. So doing this, I'm sorry, the documentation was weird on this part. The point of adding this is just to show you that we now have this app showing up, or this icon showing up right here at the top of our app. So this is doing nothing except generating the image. What we're going to do now is make this nothing do something. All right. So again, I'm just going to copy the code for the sake of convenience, and I'm going to explain what each part of the code does. Okay, so the navigator of context push is our first line that we want to talk about. What this is going to do is change the screen to display the new page. The content of that is going to be the list of the saved different names. The material view is going to show that in a form that's similar to the screen that we've been looking at. And I don't want to get lost too much in the details with you guys, but you can see that each of these components down here are built off things that we've been doing. So our title text is just the save suggestions. We're using Pascal case. We're using the same font style. So that's going to help keep our app uniform looking when we go to see this new view. Okay, so I'm going to click a couple of these, and then I'm going to click this icon. And they show up. So that title appears here, the highlighted ones appear there. If you have more questions, I know that, I can be here to explain in more detail what these do. The Flutter SDK is pretty expansive too. But right now, do you guys have any questions about what we just did? Okay, now to get back to that main screen, we click this arrow right here. And again, we can toggle the two views as we need to. And hopefully by this point, you're starting to see that this kind of layout looks like a lot of apps that you already use. This shouldn't be anything super different from most Android apps, from different iOS apps. But just for fun, we might want to change the way it looks. And to do that, we're going to have to implement a theme. To implement a theme, we're going to configure the theme data class. The default theme is this blue one with a little bit of a gray background. What we're going to do is we're going to try to make the app's primary color a pretty solid white. The reason we might do that is because right now in app development, there's kind of a trend of solid color apps. A lot of apps can be like, the quote unquote dark theme or AMOLED theme or like a white or light theme. All right, so we're going to make this consistent in terms of like light versus dark. To do that, we're going to add we're going to change one part of the My App class, the one that we started with all the way down here that we probably forgot about. And what we're going to do is we're going to just run a theme data call. It looks something like this. And all this is going to do is change the theme to this color that we define right here. So again, we're defining that this is going to be a dominant white theme. To test that, we're going to reload it, and our theme is now white. But what if it's nighttime? Or what if you like me and you just like dark colors in your theme? Well, now notice it didn't change the entire theme, but it does make this top part up here black. And so this can be good for device compatibility for like night modes and stuff. Now, we could spend some time going over other aspects of the GUI, and we could change the theme to be like a more uniform layout for like, again, AMOLED devices or night modes. But the basic idea is that we're using these really simple methods to change something as fundamental as the look and feel. All right. It doesn't change anything substantial in terms of the functionality. It's the same rando name generator, but the way that it looks can be a big deal to some people. And we want to make sure that we're thinking about our users and what their needs are. All right, so to just kind of go back and review a few big things. Again, Flutter functions with Dart Dart is an object language that's meant for portability. Much of what we do in this Flutter app thing is we just extend things that already exist. We try to make these widgets that give us differing functions so that we can do different things depending on what the need is. We can change the way that an app looks and feels. We can change the behaviors. We can make icons, text, all sorts of things. Again, you can do this in a variety of IDEs. So this is like a Linux IntelliJ setup. In Windows with something like Visual Studio, you should be able to get the same kind of features too. And like I mentioned earlier, we will have like a competition for the club at the end of, or sometime closer to the end of the year. So we do want to start thinking about maybe not something as goofy as the startup name generator, but maybe what can we do with lists, or what can we do with things that we can favorite and then see in a different view. These are things that we do in apps all the time, and we don't necessarily realize we're doing it, but we want to think about what kind of purpose can we give to these really simple features.
And I'm going to chime in here, Ricky. While you're talking about the solution challenge here, I did want to let you guys know that we will be starting in January. So if you have any ideas, again, just to refresh your memory, we're trying to solve a local issue. So you can also pair up and collaborate with a nonprofit or a small business, do something small that's like local to the our college, anything. So we will be starting in January. Yeah, Kevin, go ahead.
Can anyone join it, or do you have to be a certain experience level? Or...
Yes, anyone can join it. You do not even need to be in the major to start, but the only criteria we have is you need to be groups of 4. And just
go
ahead.
Yeah. Where can we find teammates?
Teammates. Yeah, I know. I figured. So in January, we're gonna have like an info session about this, and then we'll like create probably like a Google Sheet or something where we can divide everyone among groups, see where everyone's expertise levels are, and go from there. So if you don't have a group in mind, which is also welcome, we can break you guys up into groups. Okay, but definitely keep an eye out for that. And yeah, no problem. And lastly, I did want to also put this out there. It is a global event. You will be competing with other groups around the world. So keep an eye out for that. Sorry, Ricky, go ahead.
No, don't be sorry. That's really great information, and I'm glad that Indu brought that up. It is something that I'm really looking forward to. I know that we've had a lot of changes in terms of the way that we operate on campus this year because of things like COVID and quarantining and distance learning. So I'm actually really excited to see like what can we develop to help our school in this strange atmosphere. And I do get kind of competitive, so I am also looking forward to that aspect too. So thank you for bringing that up.
No problem.
All right, now just to kind of wrap things up, this was kind of the bulk that I had for you. I may have rushed a little bit, so I apologize in terms of the time. And also thank you guys for putting up with some of the technical issues that I encountered. Again, the long story short, it's a silly app with a serious implication to go with it. And hopefully this was helpful for you guys to start thinking about how to take different components of this UI builder and this programming language and make something meaningful with it. Because again, that's the whole point of what we're doing. With that said, that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. So are there any final thoughts or questions? Is there anything in terms of maybe like something technical you saw or an issue you ran into during the presentation? Anything at all that you guys want to talk about?
Hi. I just wanted to make a quick suggestion.
Yeah, go for it.
The use of Flutter. If you don't by any chance have a performant PC, You can also use the Flutter web framework. You just have to switch it to the I think the beta channel, and it loads a lot faster. There is some limited functionality when it comes to some packages, but for the most part, it works better for lower end PCs on Flutter web rather than running on an emulator.
That's really cool. What was your name again? I didn't see your name pop up.
Kevin.
Kevin. Okay, thanks, Kevin. I did see something about the Flutter web service, but I didn't have a chance to look into that. So I was actually curious about whether or not it was going to work well. So it sounds like you're saying that works best if your hardware isn't quite up there. Is that?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so that's really cool because I know sometimes we bounce around with different computers and yeah, that's really great. I want to try that out now. So thanks for bringing that up. I'm also really curious to know, like, and maybe you can answer this, Kevin. Can you use that web service to collaborate, or is it just to run your program for testing?
It's just to run for testing, but I believe if you do something in Visual Studio Code with like code collaboration, you could probably have some workarounds there, but I'm not entirely sure about the whole working together process.
Right. I hear you, man. Well, thank you. I want to check that out now for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or thoughts? Suggestions? All right. Again, that was all that I had for you guys today. Thank you guys for coming out to the event. I don't know if any of the other leadership team wants to make any final thoughts or convey any news.
I wanted to ask you, do you think you can upload your code in the Teams group so everyone has access to it?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me do that right now, actually.
Yeah, so that's all I had. So if you're done, I guess we can let him go.
Okay, cool. So if you want to stay and hang out and ask questions or check out this code I'm going to upload.
One more question. Where can we find the recorded video of this